August 17, 1987. Spandau Prison, West Berlin. A fortress of red brick and iron built to hold 600 men. But for the last 20 years, it has held only one. Prisoner number 7. He is 93 years old. He is frail, nearly blind in one eye, and suffers from severe arthritis in his hands. He cannot tie his own shoelaces. He cannot lift his arms above his shoulders without groaning in pain. He drags his feet when he walks, a shuffling ghost of a man who was once the deputy Führer of the Third Reich. His name is Rudolf Hess. At 2:10 p.m., a guard finds him in a small garden summer house on the prison grounds. He is lying on the floor. An electrical extension cord is wrapped around his neck. He is dead. The official report from the 4 Allied powers, Britain, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union, is released almost immediately. Suicide by hanging. Case closed. The prison is demolished shortly after, ground into dust and dumped in the North Sea to prevent it from becoming a neo-Nazi shrine. The body is buried. The secrets are sealed. But there is a problem. A massive, glaring, impossible problem that the official report ignores. How does a 93-year-old man with crippling arthritis, a man who needs a nurse to help him put on his jacket, manage to tie a complex knot, wrap a cord around his own neck, and hang himself from a window latch that is less than 5 feet off the ground? How does a man who cannot lift his arms strangle himself? And why, after 46 years of imprisonment, just weeks after the Soviet Union signaled they were finally willing to release him, did Rudolf Hess decide to die? Or did someone decide for him? This is the story of the longest classified cover-up of the 20th century. This is the story of the man who flew to Scotland to stop World War II, the man who knew the dirty secrets of the British aristocracy, and the man who was murdered to keep those secrets from walking out the front gate of Spandau Prison. Welcome to WW2 Declassified. To understand the death of Rudolf Hess, we have to go back to the flight that started it all. May 10, 1941. The height of the Blitz. London is burning. The war is a stalemate. At an airfield in Augsburg, Germany, Rudolf Hess climbs into the cockpit of a Messerschmitt Bf-110 fighter bomber. He is not a pilot by trade, but he is Hitler's deputy. He is the man who transcribed Mein Kampf in Landsberg prison. He is the most loyal, fanatical follower of the Führer. And he is about to commit high treason. Hess takes off alone. He flies across the North Sea, dodging British radar, navigating by landmarks. His destination is not a military target. It is Dungavel House in Scotland, the home of the Duke of Hamilton. Hess believes, or has been led to believe, that there is a powerful faction within the British aristocracy that wants peace with Germany. He believes he can negotiate a treaty, end the war in the West, and allow Hitler to turn his full attention to the Soviet Union. At 11 p.m., Hess runs out of fuel over Scotland. He flips the plane upside down, slides back the canopy, and bails out. He lands in a farm field, injuring his ankle. A Scottish ploughman finds him. Hess gives a fake name, Alfred Horn, and demands to see the Duke of Hamilton. When the truth comes out, the world is stunned. Hitler's deputy has defected. But the reaction is not what anyone expects. In Berlin, Hitler goes into a rage. He declares Hess insane, a madman who acted alone. He orders Hess's staff arrested. He erases Hess from the Nazi Party. In London, Winston Churchill does something equally strange. He doesn't parade Hess as a trophy. He doesn't use him for propaganda. He locks him up. He buries him in the Tower of London, then in a fortified mansion in Surrey. He orders the intelligence services to interrogate him, but the transcripts are sealed. Why? Because Rudolf Hess didn't just bring himself. He brought a peace offer. Detailed documents proposing a German withdrawal from Western Europe in exchange for a free hand in the East. And, more dangerously, he brought names. Names of British royals, dukes, and politicians who had been secretly communicating with Germany. This is the secret that terrified Churchill. If the British public knew that their own elites were trying to make a deal with Hitler while London burned, the government would collapse. So Hess had to disappear. And disappear he did. For the rest of the war, he was a ghost. Then came Nuremberg. 1946. The International Military Tribunal. Hess sat in the dock alongside Goering, Ribbentrop, and the other surviving Nazi leaders. He looked dazed. He claimed amnesia. He stared at the ceiling during proceedings. Many thought he was faking. Others thought he had been drugged. He was convicted of crimes against peace and sentenced to life imprisonment. Not death. Life. The Soviets wanted him hanged, but the Western Allies overruled them. He was sent to Spandau Prison in West Berlin, a massive complex built for 600 inmates. By 1966, Speer and von Schirach were released. Rudolf Hess was the only one left. For the next 21 years, Spandau Prison became the most expensive jail on Earth. 4 superpowers, the US, UK, France, and USSR, rotated guard duty every month. A staff of 100 people, including cooks, guards, and doctors, looked after one old man. It cost millions of dollars a year. Why? Why keep him? Humanitarian groups called for his release. He was old, harmless, a relic of a dead era. But the Soviets always said ennui. They used Hess as a pawn, a reason to keep a military foothold in West Berlin. Until 1987. In 1987, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power. Glasnost. Perestroika. The Soviet Union was changing. Reports began to circulate in diplomatic channels that Gorbachev was planning to release Hess as a gesture of goodwill to the West. He was going to let the old man go home to die with his family. This should have been good news. But in London, panic set in. If Hess was released, he would talk. He would write a book. He would finally tell the story of 1941. He would name the names. He would reveal the secret negotiations that Churchill had buried. There were powerful people in Britain who could not let that happen. And so, the clock started ticking for prisoner number 7. The timeline of August 17, 1987, is a study in contradictions. That morning, Hess was in good spirits. He had requested a new reading lamp for his cell. He had written a letter to his family about his upcoming release. At 2 p.m., he went for his daily walk in the prison garden. He was accompanied by a guard, a young American soldier named Anthony Jordan. Hess walked to the summer house, a small garden shed where he liked to sit and read. The guard stayed outside. A few minutes later, the guard looked in. He found Hess lying on the floor. An electrical extension cord from a reading lamp was wrapped around his neck. The other end was tied to a window latch handle. The official story says Hess tied the knot, looped it around his neck, and slumped down to strangle himself. Let's look at the forensics. The window latch was only about 4.5 feet off the ground. Hess was 5'9". To hang himself, he would have had to tie the knot, wrap it, and then forcefully throw his weight down to cut off the airflow. But Hess had severe arthritis in his hands. His fingers were gnarled claws. He couldn't button his shirt. How did he tie a complex slipknot? He couldn't lift his arms above his shoulders. How did he loop the cord over the latch? And then there is the autopsy. The first autopsy was performed by a British pathologist, Dr. James Cameron. He ruled it a suicide by asphyxiation. But the Hess family wasn't buying it. They hired a renowned German pathologist, Professor Wolfgang Spahn, to perform a second, independent autopsy. Professor Spahn found something that the British report had conveniently missed. On Hess's neck, there was a mark. Not the V-shaped mark typical of a hanging, where the cord pulls up towards the knot. No. It was a horizontal mark. A mark that goes straight across the throat. In forensic science, a horizontal ligature mark indicates strangulation from behind. It means someone wrapped a cord around his neck and pulled it tight while standing behind him. Professor Spahn stated in his report, "The injury pattern is not consistent with typical hanging. It is consistent with throttling." Then there was the struggle. The autopsy found extensive bruising on Hess's chest and broken ribs. The official report said this was from CPR attempts by the guards. But the bruising was deep and severe, consistent with someone kneeling on his chest to pin him down. And what about the guard? The American soldier, Anthony Jordan. He was the only witness. He gave a statement saying he found Hess and tried to save him. But Jordan was not a regular prison guard. He was a fill-in. And curiously, on the day of the death, the regular routine of the prison had been changed. Two mysterious men in American uniforms were seen entering the prison grounds that morning. They were not part of the regular detail. Witnesses described them as professional, cold, distinct from the young draftees usually guarding the perimeter. Who were they? Some researchers believe they were SAS. Others say CIA. But their presence in a high-security facility on the exact day the only prisoner dies is impossible to ignore. Then there is the note. A suicide note was found in Hess's pocket. It was written on the back of a letter from his daughter-in-law. It thanked the prison directors and his family. It seemed to seal the case. But Hess's son, Wolf Rudiger Hess, examined the note. He claimed it was a forgery. Or rather, a composite. He said the handwriting was shaky, different from Hess's current style. He believed the note had been written years earlier, perhaps during a period of illness when Hess thought he was dying, and kept by the British to be used as a prop. When the time was right, the family filed a murder charge. They accused the British government of assassination. The German police opened an investigation. But Spandau Prison was under Allied jurisdiction. The German police were blocked. They were not allowed to interview the guards. They were not allowed to examine the scene. And then, the scene was destroyed. Within days of Hess's death, the British military began demolishing Spandau Prison. They brought in wrecking balls and bulldozers. They didn't just knock it down, they pulverized it. The bricks were crushed into powder. The steel was melted down. The debris was loaded onto trucks and dumped into the North Sea. Why? The official reason was to prevent it from becoming a neo-Nazi shrine. But convenient side effect? It destroyed every shred of forensic evidence. No blood spatter analysis. No reenactment of the hanging geometry. No way to prove that a 93-year-old cripple couldn't reach the window latch. The crime scene was erased from the face of the earth. But the most damning evidence comes from a man named Abdallah Malawi. Malawi was Hess's medical orderly. He was a Tunisian nurse who had cared for Hess for 5 years. He knew Hess's physical limitations better than anyone. He was the one who tied Hess's shoes. On the day of the death, Malawi was delayed at the prison gate. The guards wouldn't let him in. They held him for 20 minutes, which had never happened before. When he finally forced his way into the summer house, he saw a scene of chaos. Furniture was overturned. Hess was lying on the floor. But Malawi saw something else. He saw the two American strangers standing over the body. They looked calm. They weren't panicking like the regular guards. Malawi later wrote a book. He stated unequivocally, Rudolf Hess was murdered. He said Hess physically could not have done it. He said he had warned Hess weeks earlier that they were going to kill him because of the release rumors. Hess had been afraid. He had asked Malawi to smuggle messages out to his family. So, why was he silenced? The motive is the key to any murder investigation. In 1987, the Cold War was ending. The Berlin Wall would fall 2 years later. The Soviet archives were opening. If Hess had been released, he would have been the biggest media event in history. Imagine the press conference. The last surviving leader of the Third Reich, the man who sat at Hitler's right hand, free after 46 years. He would have been asked about the flight. He would have been asked, "Who did you meet in Scotland? What did the Duke of Hamilton say? Did Churchill know? Was the British royal family involved?" Even in 1987, these were dangerous questions. The House of Windsor had spent decades distancing themselves from their German connections and the pro-Nazi sympathies of King Edward VIII. A senile but talkative Hess could have dropped a bomb on the British establishment. There is also the theory of the double. For decades, conspiracy theorists argued that the man in Spandau wasn't Rudolf Hess at all. They claimed the real Hess was shot down in 1941 or killed in secret, and an imposter was sent to prison. This theory was based on the fact that the prisoner refused to see his family for 28 years. He claimed amnesia when it was convenient. He didn't have the chest scars from World War I that Hess should have had. But in 2011, DNA tests on a blood sample from the prisoner finally proved a 99.9% match with Hess's living relatives. The imposter theory is dead. The man in the cell was Rudolf Hess, which makes the murder theory even stronger. If he was the real Hess, he held the real secrets. In 2013, the British government released a batch of files related to Hess. But many files were held back, retained for national security. In 2017, more files were released. They revealed that the British intelligence services had been obsessed with Hess right up until the end. They showed that the Foreign Office was terrified of his release. One memo from a British diplomat stated plainly, the release of Hess would be an embarrassment to Her Majesty's government. Embarrassment is a polite diplomatic word. In the world of black ops, preventing embarrassment is often a code for eliminate the asset. Let's look at the methodology again. The horizontal ligature mark, the broken ribs, the delay of the nurse, the destruction of the prison, the impossible physical feat of a cripple hanging himself. It fits the pattern of a professional hit made to look like a suicide. A suiciding. It happens in intelligence work all the time. The target is old. Who will question it? He was depressed. He was a Nazi. Who cares? But we should care. Not because Hess was a good man. He was a committed Nazi who helped build a regime of terror. We should care because the truth matters. If the British government assassinated a prisoner of war in 1987 to cover up secrets from 1941, it changes our understanding of history. It means the history books are incomplete. It means the good war had dark, dirty corners that the Allies are still protecting. The death of Rudolf Hess was the final casualty of World War II. The war didn't end in 1945 for him. It ended in a garden shed in Berlin in 1987. The cord around his neck was the final act of a conflict that killed millions. And the men who pulled it tight were ensuring that the victor's version of history would remain the only version. Today, the summer house is gone. The prison is a shopping center parking lot. The body of Rudolf Hess was exhumed in 2011, cremated, and the ashes scattered at sea to stop neo-Nazis from visiting his grave. He has been erased. Physically, completely erased. Just like the files. Just like the evidence. But the questions remain. Why did he fly? Who did he meet? And why, 46 years later, did he have to die? The answer is likely locked in a vault in London, marked top secret until the year 2040. But until then, evidence we do have points to one chilling conclusion. Rudolf Hess didn't kill himself. He was silenced because he was the prisoner who knew too much. Subscribe to WW2 Declassified. Because the war isn't over until we know the truth.